little break from draft coverage because we got some Cleveland Browns news from today. We're going to break it all down. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Become an everydayer and learn for yourself. The show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Your Cleveland Browns, some breaking news. Two things. Greg Newsome, fifth-year option picked up. We'll start off with that. Brian Allen, veteran center, also signed today. For Greg, and it'll be about $13 million and change for the 2025 NFL season. For anybody not positive, first-round contracts, first 4 years, obviously are going to happen. Fifth year is always a team option. Greg Newsome has his picked up. Obviously, these are going to be conversations we do not have over the next couple of seasons, as the Browns will not have a fifth-year option to pick up from 22, 23, 24. So it's going to be a while before we start talking about fifth-year options again in relation to the Cleveland Browns. But for Greg, look, it is well-deserved. And if you go back more than a year ago, there was this odd situation where the Browns were, going to bring in a new defensive coordinator, which meant most likely a new defensive system. Greg was coming off his second season, former first-round pick, had a great rookie season, was injured a little bit his second season, and the emergence of a rookie named Martin Emerson Jr. had a lot of folks talking and questioning about what was maybe the future of the cornerback room. You get to 2023, and the three just gelled, meshed, and it really, really took off. Of course, I'm speaking of Denzel, of course, Martin Emerson, and certainly Greg Newsome Jr. Questions were whether or not Greg Newsome wanted to, solely be the slot. Look, no corner wants to be the slot. Nobody wants to be. Everybody knows the island is where the money is to be made. But to Greg Newsome's credit, he just put his nose down, played ball. Guys missed time in the NFL, which certainly put Greg on the outside for some opportunities. Greg missed a little time himself. Greg had one of the biggest, in my opinion, plays that probably nobody talks about in relation to the 2023 season, and that was that batted ball that felt like it was in the air for 575 minutes in Baltimore. And all of a sudden, there was Greg Newsome, picked it, took it down the sidelines, scored, missed the extra point, if everybody remembers. And then there was that rallying moment where everybody went over to the kicker and said, it's all right, we're going to get this back. We're going to get this opportunity. Browns did just that. Beautiful drive. If you remember, there's some big physical plays. David Njoku carrying Baltimore Ravens for about a quarter mile through the grass in Baltimore, setting up a game-winning field goal attempt for one Dustin Hopkins. Down the middle, Browns beat Baltimore. So 4G knew to have this, and look, now this will be every dime of that rookie contract. So Greg Newsome will be a very, very wealthy young man. It gives him financial security. He knows what he is going to make in 2024. He knows what he's going to make in 2025. The Browns will have a very, very strange situation in for 2025, where you will have both Martin Emerson Jr. and Greg Newsome, basically playing out their rookie contracts, at the same time consecutively, of course. Denzel Ward's contract is set to expire in 2027, at which time Denzel Ward will play his age 30 season. I mean, who knows how all that works out? But for the Browns, this is something where we are not even thinking about that situation until at least next offseason. Because by next offseason, depending on how Martin Emerson play and certainly how Greg Newsome plays, and if both play extremely well, their agents are going to want to start talking 26, 27, 28 money. That's just the way it goes. But the Browns have 1 year for this to get figured out. Ideally, the best scenario for everybody involved is that everybody plays well. And if financially you just can't keep everybody, be that as it may, and maybe something that goes. But it doesn't necessarily automatically have to be a Greg Newsome versus a Martin Emerson Jr. thing. At that point, Denzel Ward, like I said, will be, finishing his age 28 season. Who knows? Stranger things have happened, and it's certainly 2 seasons away before we start having those discussions. But, happy for Greg. And I think people made more of the situation than it ever was. There was a lot of uncertainty in that defensive room when Jim Schwartz got here. We kind of knew who the dudes were, and it was Denzel and it was Miles. I think a lot of people had, big thoughts as to what, Grant Delpit could be. And I think Grant showed that early in 2023, which certainly led to his contract extension. We had certainly some good feelings about Zadarius Smith, but you already had Jim Schwartz here by then. The rookies last season, you had already had Jim Schwartz here by then. So there was a lot of uncertainty for the guys who were in the locker room, the locker room the way it was when Jim Schwartz got to town as to, where they fit. Were they going to be Jim Schwartz guys? And for Greg Newsome, it was a chance to embrace the opportunity, embrace the role that they wanted him to play. For people who did have some questions, because Greg missed a good amount of time while he was at Northwestern, people had questions about Greg's physicality. Was he going to be able to hold up? And Greg was a tough son of a gun last year. There were plays in the backfield. Greg was hitting people. Greg was getting dirty. Greg was sticky in coverage from the slot, from the nickel. He had a really, really nice year, and it's collectively, it is a fantastic unit, this cornerback unit. So I'm really glad that it is just going to be able to continue like this. Greg does not have to worry. Certainly Denzel is in a really good place, and Martin is 1 year away from where it's going to start talking about his future money. But it is a really, really talented group. I think they're just going to get better. You look at Denzel; it's over 15 career interceptions. Martin Emerson, 4 interceptions last year. Greg Newsome, his first big-time interception, pick 6 last year. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, in Baltimore. So the way it worked out for all these guys is a really, really good spot. And look, if it plays into the fact that it becomes a financial issue, it's certainly a possibility. But who knows by then what you're paying your offensive line. And we're going to get to that in segment 3 because the offensive line certainly changed. And I think Andrew Berry, for everything we all thought was going to happen with the Browns' offensive line, this offseason, certainly draft season, I think Andrew Berry said, man, you guys were all zigging when I was zagging. But as far as that, though, but Greg Newsome, 5th-year option picked up. The top 3 corners for the Cleveland Browns, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome, will remain intact for the 2024 season. One of the biggest strengths of the Browns last season will continue. You think the pass rush is going to be even better here in 2025. So obviously for the Cleveland Browns, bang up job here getting this done. Greg Newsome in a really good place, big time financial security, and hopefully looking for a big, big year in 2024 from the cornerbacks. We're going to continue talking the rest of that cornerback room. Your latest Locked On Browns rolls on. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. The NBA playoffs are getting excited. I'm sure everybody's excited. I know, are you following your local team? Are you now wondering whether or not I can maybe even sneak in to one of my team's home playoff games? Well, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. We've got Game 5s coming up, which means Game 6s and Game 7s, and the excitement it gets to you. It's one thing to watch on TV. It is another thing to be in the building. They have last-minute deals. Save 60% off. Buy Buying your ticket last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Lowest price guarantee from Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better deal somewhere else. Your Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Jeff Lloyd, your latest Locked On Browns rolls on. As always, we appreciate every one of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. If you're not part of the everyday crowd by now, make a new plan, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. We're talking a little bit here, certainly one of the big news of the day, and we'll get to the Brian Allen sighting in segment 3. Greg Newsome has the 5th-year option officially picked up. Not a surprise. I don't think anybody, thought this was going any other way. Even once we got to the, week of the draft and during the draft, you noticed all those Greg Newsome, anybody trying to light the fire to that story, that was over. It was done with, and I always tell you the one to look at in situations like these are usually Mary Kay Cabot's account. Mary Kay, if you remember last year when everybody thought there was no more talks of Elijah Moore whatsoever, about once every 4 or 5 days, Mary Kay kept kind of lighting a match, throwing it in that dried up rubble and seeing if there was a flame there. And certainly, true to fruition, as she usually is with the connection she has. If she says it, she probably heard it from a reliable source. What do you know? Lo and behold, eventually Elijah Moore did indeed, in fact, end up a Cleveland Brown. But now you look at the way the rest of this cornerback room is, and we know obviously the top 3 between Denzel, certainly, and of course, Martin and Greg Newsome. Now you get to, basically the rest of that room. And, we all know Cam Mitchell, he'll be going into year 2. Justin Hardy, Browns put a pretty good priority on bringing Justin Hardy in here. Justin Hardy is going to play a lot of special teams for this team, but there's going to have to be a roster spot for him. Khalif Halassi, if you don't remember, he was a undrafted free agent from the Kansas City Chiefs. The Browns picked him up last year on final cutdown weekend. He got to play probably more than the Browns expected. I think he held up pretty well. I'm not sure the future here. You have Tony Brown, who they signed as a free agent, and that's interesting because now you have Tony Brown. And, of course, you have Hardy. Excuse me. That's 2 cornerbacks right there with a special teams specialty. So Browns, as talented as this roster is, I'm not sure how they're going to have the luxury to keep both of those players in the fold. Vincent Gray is here, if you remember, played sparingly last year as well. Not sure that there's probably much of a future here for him. And then, of course, you went out and you drafted Miles Harden. So Miles Harden is here as well. Miles Harden is, a guy with a big nickel presence. And if you remember when we were speaking with Pete Smith yesterday, just a feisty SOB. He gets into it. He gets after it. Lots of physicality, plays bigger than he is, likes to tackle, has no issues with any of that. So the Browns, this is something where you keep 6. So right off the bat, we know Denzel's here. We know Greg is here. We certainly know Martin Emerson Jr. is here. You figure one of Hardy or Troy Brown are going to be here. That's 5 right there. Then you've got Cam Mitchell. I'm sorry, that's 4. Then you got Cam Mitchell. You've got, of course, he's battling it out. With the rookie Miles Harden, there's a lot of depth to this room. Khalif Halassi being one of them as well. There's a lot of depth to this room, and the Browns are going to have to go through this and. It's going to be a big battle. It's going to be a big fight to see who, what corners can stay here for Cleveland. Cleveland's going to be in a really interesting situation this summer because they're going to be guys that are certainly worthy of making the final 53. They're going to be guys who probably deserve to make the Cleveland Browns final 53, but there is not going to be a chance in hell that some of these guys are going to make the final 53 for the Cleveland Browns. Now, back in the day, when you used to have that final cutdown weekend and the Browns used to wait, remember, because it used to be Labor Day Monday. And that's basically where the Browns went back to school shopping. All right, well, we need a corner. We probably need a punter. We need a backup tackle. We need a tight end. That's not the case. The Browns used to be buyers on cutdown weekend. The Browns are going to be major sellers on cut down weekend? Can some of these guys possibly be turned into a future asset? And look, whatever draft pick you can get, somebody wants to give me a fifth as opposed to just cutting the guy. What am I going to do? I'm going to take this. I'm going to take the draft choice. That's what good business does. But anybody, you always felt that, secondary cornerback safety was always going to be a huge, huge factor for the way these rosters were constructed. When you're talking about a head coach who was a former collegiate safety, when you were talking about a general manager who was a former collegiate cornerback, they, value the position and understanding how to construct your defense. If you were a winning team, a winning franchise, you should have an emphasis on secondary, a major emphasis on secondary. You are going to be playing with the lead a lot more often than not in the second half, which means you are going to get then 90 to 95% of the other team just throwing the ball all over the field on you. So the Browns, it's a major focus of how the defense is constructed. And it was really, really a smart hire when they went the Jim Schwartz route, because Jim Schwartz came in and basically told all these defensive backs, I'm going to make your life the easiest thing I can possibly do. Give me a second and a half, because I'm going to have either the quarterback on his back or running for his life in that time with my scheme and the way I do it. And the Browns certainly added to Jim Schwartz's system as far as, pass rushers. You were deep at edge, of course, Miles, Darius Agbanaya, Ankarokwo, Alex Wright, who I think is going to have a really, really great year in year 3, Isaiah McGuire. And then, of course, you look at the defensive tackle room. Tomlinson, an okay rusher from the inside, and certainly not what you pay him for. So you get more from him than you're asking him for. Ika, certainly still a wild card, but you get to the rest of that room. We know Quentin Jefferson can get after the quarterback. We know Shelby Harris can get after the quarterback. We know Maurice Hurst can get after the quarterback. And the young buck, Mike Hall Jr. will certainly be aiding in that as well. So you just look at this, and it's just tremendous depth that this team has. It should make for great practices. It certainly should make for great joint practices over the summer. These guys are going to get a lot of run in exhibition games, because I think the Browns are not going to be playing starters in the preseason. If they've learned anything over the last couple of years, you probably don't need it. And the risk is just absolutely too great to risk any of these guys in big time moments. So it's been, a big day here for Greg Newsome, because the young man has put in his time, and, some of the time missed, his second year, certainly in 2022, you don't want to lose your spot because of injury, but, Martin Emerson was such a guy that kind of came out of the dark for some. And I still remember his rookie summer for Martin Emerson when the Eagles were in town for, group practice. And I told you, I got a text from him, a friend with the Philadelphia Eagles, and it was just basically simple sentence. Y'all stole Martin Emerson Jr. And, it wasn't that Greg didn't play well. It was just that Martin came into the scene. Luckily, Greg was just able to understand that obstacle and say, well, you know what? I'm going to use this as motivation. We are a great unit together, and I'm going to make everybody remember my name. The Denzel Award, make them know your name. That's exactly what Greg Newsome did in 2023 for the Cleveland Browns, and got his 5th-year option picked up. Brian Allen was signed by the Cleveland Browns. We're going to talk about that next. Locked On Browns continues. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there is so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or you heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So go get off the bench and go download it now free on the Google Play app or the App Store. Game on. Jeff Lloyd closing out your latest Locked On Browns. Greg Newsome, 5th-year option picked up. The other Cleveland Browns news of the day. The Cleveland Browns have signed veteran offensive lineman Brian Allen, center from the Los Angeles Rams, former 5th-round pick of the Los Angeles Rams as well. If you remember, Brian Allen's best career in the NFL was just a couple of years ago. The Los Angeles Rams Super Bowl winning team. Odd, interesting tidbit about Brian Allen is Brian Allen was the first NFL player diagnosed publicly with COVID-19. Just interesting. Obviously doesn't mean a thing. But a heck of a career, and there was a lot of injuries. Brian Allen, and I believe the amount of starts is, I want to say it's in the 30s, the amount of starts that Brian Allen has had in his time. But the thing is, there were a lot of times, there was a season he was a starter, he only played 5 games. After the Super Bowl season, he got hurt and missed the end of that season. By the time he came back for 2023, there had somebody that kind of beat him out. And, Brian was with the team in 2023, didn't play much, played sparingly. And this was after he got a contract year after the Super Bowl season. I think it was 3 years, $24 million, something in that range. And all of a sudden he was the odd man out. And, as roster cutdowns began in February, Brian Allen was one of the guys that was no longer affiliated with the Los Angeles Rams. Interesting that it took this long. There were a lot of teams who needed a starting center. We talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers. There were other teams who needed a starting center. So for a guy who was the starting center on a Super Bowl winning team to wait all the way until April 30th to finally get his name called to be signed, certainly odd. But what I was talking about in the beginning, Andrew Berry, as far as his offensive line, what did we all say? Oh, man, they're going to go young. It's probably maybe two offensive linemen. Maybe it's 3 offensive linemen. Well, the way the Browns' offensive line currently is consisted, Joe Bitonio, your starting left guard, has 144 career starts in the NFL. Jack Conklin, your right tackle, has 94 career starts in the NFL. Wyatt Teller has 75 starts in his NFL career. Your center, Ethan Posick, has 68 starts in his career. Jedrick Wills has 53 starts in his career. Now let's go take a little bit, some of the guys battling for reserve spots, right? Jermaine Ifedi has 83 career starts. Brian Allen, just brought in today, 32 career starts in the NFL. Hakeem Adeniji, reserve tackle that nobody seems to be talking about that the Browns did bring in, 15 career starts. James Hudson, 14 career starts. Then you still have DeJuan Jones on this roster. You still have Luke Whippler on this roster. You still have Michael Dunn on this roster. And, of course, young rookie Zach Zinter. Zach Zinter, and credit my buddy Pete Smith on this one, Zach Zinter had none, zip, zilch penalties in the 2023 season. More broken bones than penalties. That's difficult probably to do in the NFL. So as much as we all thought this offensive line was going to end up becoming, maybe the final ride of this offensive line of Posick, Joel, Wyatt, Jed, and Jack, and, it's going to be the future in that room. And, well, the future is present. I mean, whether or not Jermaine Ifedi makes his team, I think he's another one of these guys that Browns would be loving to maybe offload in the summer for a draft pick. Brian Allen, who knows? You have Luke Whippler going into year 2, and who knows? But, somebody's going to have to do some guard duties. So we'll see how that works, and we'll certainly see where Luke Whippler is at, that he, put on a little more muscle mass this year. You don't ever want to just label a guy a center until they are a starter. It's okay to be just a center if you're the starting center. But otherwise, you got to be able to do something. And if you remember Nick Harris a couple of years back, he had to play some guard. It wasn't always the prettiest moment, but Nick Harris did have to play some guard back in the day. Hakeem Adeniji fighting for a swing tackle job. James Hudson fighting for a swing tackle job. But that's for 4 or 5 because we know who the top 3 are, and obviously that is Jed. Certainly that is Jack, and certainly that is DeJuan Jones. Michael Dunn, this will probably be his last year. You think Zach Zintner will be the guy that jumps into an open guard position to be had if there is one in 2025. And then, of course, it's just as weird. I mean, I never thought this Browns offensive line room would be as veteran heavy as it is. And even Zinter, he's not an old rookie. He's an older rookie, as he's already 23 years old. But it's really, really, just odd, because I think none of us saw this coming. We really thought there was going to be a youth movement here, and we really thought there were going to be some young developmental guys in Maybe with the first round pick next year, a second round pick next year, maybe the Browns are going to say, look, we'd rather use, if we have to go offensive line, maybe we would like the luxury to go higher up in the draft for these guys, where maybe there are less kinks, there are less concerns, guys are surefire, more NFL ready. Certainly could be the way the Browns go for the offensive line talks in 2025. This is the way they chose to do it here for 2024. Only thing I'm going to say is, can you get me a tight end? Please get me a tight end. I'm begging you, Andrew. Get me a tight end. That's all I want. That's all I want. That's all I want. So, Greg Newsome, fifth-year option picked up. Greg will be here for the next 2 seasons, and Greg will make well over $13 million in 2025. Kudos, Greg Newsome. Talked about the way the defensive backs in general are huge for this team. Certainly the state of the cornerback room, a deep, deep room. As much as everybody wants to whine about the draft and what Andrew Berry did or didn't do, you go digging through this Browns roster, and it is deep everywhere, except tight end, of course. So Andrew Berry, again, just the man just finds a way to get it done each and every year. And as I've been saying, none of this, it's all on Deshaun. It's okay. It is all on what Deshaun Watson can do for this team. Deshaun Watson plays like I know he's capable of, like I think he was playing in 2023. Cleveland Browns will be a damn good football team in 2024, and certainly with their eyes on an extended run in the 2024-2025 NFL playoffs. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns. I appreciate you all so much for making the show your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube page and join the filthy animals. Show is always available, always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go Browns.